Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Sara Gottfried. Welcome back to the Health Bridge. I am here with my brother in arms, Pedram Shojai. Hi, Pedram.
Hi, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
Good to be back. Welcome back to the Health Bridge. We are so excited about our new season. We're going to talk about fasting today, and we really want to emphasize more about the East meets West meets best, because we feel like that's really where Pedram and I shine.
I think so. And we've, and this isn't us guessing. We've been listening to a lot of the feedback on our Facebook page, and we're actually going to be doing some really new stuff this year. And so we're going to kind of create this arc right now. Is we're working towards turning the Health Bridge into a proper TV show. And as we start going, we're not going to guess. We're going to help ourselves understand what's working based on your guys' feedback. So the more you guys engage back with us and let us know what's working and be like, oh my God, Pedram, shut up, you talk too much, or Sarah, I really like that part of what you said, will really help us. And so we want this to be something that you guys have ownership of. So by the time this thing is on TV sets all over the world, and we have some really serious TV people that are working with us, we're working it out right now. We're working it out with our tribe, and we want you guys to come with us and help build this with us. So please let us know what parts of what we're doing are working better or not so much working for you guys.
That's right. Feedback is essential. So one of the best ways to do that is to go to facebook.com/the Health Bridge. Let us know what you love. Let us know what you don't love. We want your feedback.
Yeah, and don't be shy. I mean, we are not trained Hollywood professionals. We're both doctors that come from different parts of the universe, but we're here to tell it like it is, and we're here to help. And so what we want to do is keep the show kind of raw and authentic, but bring some more structure and formulaic stuff to it and test what's working. So we're going to test it with you guys, but the test only works if it's two ways. So let's jump into what we want to talk about today. There's some really interesting research coming out of the NIH and Johns Hopkins. It has to do with fasting, which really is a great East meets West topic that we could jump into. So Sarah, do you want to talk about the study?
Yeah, it was funny, Pedram. My husband came home from work in December, and he was super excited. And he was like yelling at me from the car in the driveway saying, honey, come out, come out, come out. There's this study on NPR. You got to come hear this. And the study was about these rats that fasted for 16 hours, and they improved their blood sugar. They lost weight. They burned fat. Their immune system got better. And he wanted me to come hear this. And when I started to hear about it, I just was like, okay, we've known about this for a long time. Why is this novel? So fasting's great because we've been doing it for thousands of years, and now the science is starting to catch up.
Yeah, if you look at the ancient yogis and a big part of most spiritual traditions, fasting was a part of it. And they talked about the health benefits. They talked about the clarity that was gained, and they didn't understand epigenetics, but they understood that people who fasted did better, and it really kind of flies squarely in the face of the 3 square meals and the multiple snacks and the standard American European diet that we've become accustomed to. So I think that's an interesting conversation to be had, because I personally have had some issues with fasting in my later years, because when I threw off my cortisol levels, it was a lot more challenging. And like all of the medical information that was there said, look, I need to keep my blood sugar stable and I shouldn't fast. But then when I read studies like this, it's like, well, fasting's so much better for you. And so I'd love to clear up some of that for our listeners as well on this show, because just because a study comes out and says something doesn't mean that it absolutely 100% pertains to you. You got to look at your own kind of health needs and stuff. But like long-term overall, absolutely. Like one of the number one, if not the number one indicator for longevity is caloric restriction. So let's have at it.
Yeah, well, I love, Pedram, that you brought up the cortisol equation, because I'm cortisol girl, and I feel like there's this tug of war when it comes to intermittent fasting between your stress response system and this desire for better productivity, for better blood sugar control, for better fat burning, and maybe immune function, even mental clarity, which is one of those promises of intermittent fasting. So as you look at these two different sides of the coin, I think it's those people who have an overactivated stress response who don't do well with fasting. And I happen to be one of those, right?
Mm,
I mean, you're
mm.
just talking about how this has been something that you've had in your past. I think you had it for like a very limited amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been more longstanding for me. So when cortisol is more out of whack, what happens when you fast is that your body says, "Oh my gosh, it's a famine. Let's jack up the cortisol so that we can, keep the blood sugar up." That's one of the jobs of cortisol. So I think to get the benefits of fasting, you really have to be honest about your cortisol functioning, your stress response. You've really got to optimize it in order to get those promises of fasting.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. It's a health benefit, and so if you're not deriving a health benefit from it, then you really got to step back. Back in the day, I would fast once a week. I just had a day a week where I fasted and I didn't speak, and it was wonderful until I actually broke some things when I got busy and was playing business guy. And once the cortisol went out, I started to become a reactive hypoglycemic. Right? It's the body really panics without that sugar. So really, what's the pathway back to that, Sarah? Let's start creating a bridge, if you will, back to someone's ability to be able to fast and do so in a healthy way. Because I think so many people are suffering with the obvious, kind of cortisol stress, maladaptation issues that you talk about in your books, and it's almost like an epidemic. Right. So on one end, all the paleo guys are doing backflips saying, you got to intermittent fast. On the other end, you look at the population and they're sick and they probably oughtn't until they have the clearance to do so. So let's peel back on that a little bit. And I'd love to hear your wisdom on that.
Oh, you got it. And I want to hear, some more of the East when it comes to fasting, because I think that's such an interesting area. So I like to call this the cortisol unlock. How do you get cortisol to really be working for you, serving you on your team, not working against you? So I would say there's a few steps to this. The first step is to measure, because what you measure improves. Lord Kelvin said that. So I am a big fan of measuring where you are with your cortisol. You can do a AM cortisol. Kind of classic is to do a blood test where you're looking at serum cortisol, 8 a.m. You want that to be in this optimal range of about 10 to 15. I talk about this a lot in both of my books. And then the second step, I think, is to retrain your mind. And oh my gosh, we talk about this almost every episode on the Health Bridge. How do you start to change that patterning that all of us have when it comes to the stress response? And I'm especially talking to the ladies here, because we know that women are more vulnerable. There's just something about our sensitivity, our ability to care for the young, that makes our control system, also known as the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, it's just more wonky. It's more likely to be disrupted. So I would say step one is measure. Maybe you do a 4-point cortisol in your saliva. You can order that at a bunch of different labs. We'll stick that on Facebook. And then step two is to retrain the mind. And then step three is to really get your food in order. So those are the three big parts I would say for the cortisol unlock. But Pedram, you have a lot to say about this too.
Yeah, this is a big piece of where Chinese medicine steps in. What we call is liver overacting on spleen. And it's just this different language of looking at many of the same kind of functions, right? And so the overall effect of stress on the body impacts the digestive capacity and impacts the body's ability to move qi and flow and really kind of be in stride in life. And so what happens is when your cortisol levels are off, then we'll see the same thing where the body's just not flowing correctly and the digestion isn't working, and you'll have alternating loose stools and constipation and all sorts of the symptomology that comes with that. But in terms of fasting specifically, the body likes having energy on one end, but the body also needs a break. So if we give the digestive system a break. Think about it as like kind of like a mail room, right? Like it's a processing center. So there's stuff coming in, you got to process it and then kind of move. You move the checks over here, you move the garbage over here. You know, you got an operation going. But if that becomes an inefficient operation, sometimes it's better to just be like, okay, everyone off. Let's relook at our systems. Let's make sure everything's working, and let's just kind of clean house for a day. And so cleaning house for a day takes all of this energy that we dump into the digestive process, right? And reallocates that chi, if you will, that energy into the immunity, into the detox pathways, into all the things that are running the body's other systems. But what happens is we talk about like stagnation in the Chinese terms, right? And you know, we talk about leaky gut, we can talk about all these other things that we could kind of reference on the Western side. But when there's stagnation in the middle, energy gets wasted. And then over the years, we get so much of this inefficiency built up that we are unable to process and extract the energy from our food as efficiently. So sometimes it's almost like a net loss. You're putting in so much energy to pull out energy. It's like you're just running around on a hamster wheel and you're putting on weight. And let's face it, most of us have calories to spare. So in an Eastern perspective, if you stop and you give your system a break, it helps the immune system, it helps you're healing your detox pathways, but it also puts you into what we know as, you know, ketosis, or, you know, ketogenic type of activity, where then you're burning off fat that creates a tremendous amount of clarity, mental clarity, focused acuity up in your brain. And so you can use that to guide your meditation and use that to really kind of think about your life. So one of the issues that I have with this intermittent fasting phenomenon that's happening right now is people are running around living their daily lives, still trying to bang through all of their to-dos while fasting. And it creates a tremendous amount of strain on the system, because what you do as an animal when you're starving is either you're hunting for food or you're hunkering down and saying, well, it's night and it's cold and there is nothing to eat right now, so I'm going to conserve energy. And so being mindful about where you're at, where your consciousness is parked during fasting, is a big part of the Eastern tradition that didn't really carry over into our new fad that's happening here. And I think that there's a conversation to be had there. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's different.
Okay, I so appreciate this, Pedram. I love these analogies that you've given us, these metaphors of where's your consciousness parked. You know, that's so important when you're fasting. We want to make sure that you're parked in the right place. And I also really appreciate this mailroom analogy, this idea that, you know, you're sorting your mail, you got your checks, you got the junk mail, you know, you've got to take a break from that. And I also think that the way you've described fasting in a maybe more spiritual sense or physical sense as a pattern interrupt, I just think that is such an interesting idea. It's such a great meeting place of East and West, sort of the physical pattern interrupt of fasting, and also the mental or emotional or spiritual pattern interrupt. So that's what I like most about it too. And I want to circle back to the checks in the mailroom, because I think one of the checks in the mailroom is your food. So as Pedram and I talk about intermittent fasting, and we'll get into some of the specifics in a minute, like there's some popular books out there, like the 5-2 diet, where you eat normally 5 days out of the week, and then you fast or really restrict your calories 2 days out of the week. I happen to like, you know, somewhere between about 14 and 18 hours based on the literature in terms of an overnight fast, and we can talk about what that looks like. But in terms of the checks in the mailroom, I think a crucial check is to make sure that your food is appropriate for a fast. So for instance, if you're going to have an early dinner, so walk through this math with me. If you have dinner at 4 p.m. and then you don't eat until breakfast the next morning, say at 8 a.m., that's a 16-hour fast. That's what we're talking about with all this new literature on intermittent fasting. So that's a really good example, I think, of what an intermittent fast would look like in your life. Now, if you're eating 3 cupcakes or half a chocolate cake or a little Ben & Jerry's before, you know, that's your 4 p.m. dinner, you're going to be miserable. Like, you're really going to be suffering. Your blood sugar is just going to be a major problem, and you're going to have it's just going to feel, like your skin is crawling. So what we're talking about here in terms of food is to really make sure that you're getting quality protein, you're getting enough fat, you're limiting refined carbohydrates. That dinner that you have, maybe it's a smoothie, maybe it's a shake that has all these nutrients that we tend to get more depleted in, so that you really have the kind of blood sugar stability over that 14 to 18 hours if you're doing, for instance, an overnight fast. So I really like the checks in the mailroom. I just think food is one of those important sets of checks.
Mm. The quality of the food and the availability of that food, it's it's not just macronutrients. I mean, we're not talking about just calories. We're talking about nutrition, right? We're talking about getting all the phytonutrients, getting all of the enzymatic factors, all the things that you want to derive from food to be nourished. And so just eating a cupcake will satiate you for a second, but it'll slam you on the ground. We don't need to revisit that so much, as we've done a number of shows on sugar. But it's a really important piece, right? And so I know a lot of people that do, say, 6 p.m. and then, will fast till noon. They'll just skip breakfast. And so there's a lot of ways to go about that. And there's a lot of ways to articulate that, so long as, again, you're being careful with the way you're throttling and using your body. I mean, the body likes this, and we'll get into it. We have survivor genes, right? And to feel like we're pushing those survivor genes, to feel like we're alive, and to remind the body that it should stay optimal and stay kind of on edge, we're starting to see works. I mean, I look back at my Kung Fu tradition, and everything is Kung Fu, right? Like death is always stalking over your left shoulder. And so you always need to be hypervigilant and up and alert and all these types of things that keep your survivor genes going. And there's intermittent fasting, there's using broths and soups and all this kind of stuff. But that was built into the tradition. And I think that that's something that's really lacking in our culture. It's like, if you're intermittent fasting, but all you're doing is watching, reruns of TV and really living a lifestyle that is sedentary, I don't know if you're pushing that genomic expression to the right extent either. You also have to move. You also have to do all these. If you really want to get the benefits, right? It's not just one thing. And just one more point is, I think it was Ben Franklin that said this. He said, any person can fast, but it takes a real wise man to come off a fast. Right? So what you eat coming off of a fast is incredibly important. I had, for years, clinically, I had all these people that would, in the old days, everyone was doing the master cleanse. It's like, hey, I need to lose some weight for a wedding. I'm going to drink lemonade for 10 days, right? And then when it's over, they'd go have some like mashed potatoes and gravy and steak, and then they'd feel awful for 4 days, right? So coming off
and a couple of cocktails.
And a couple of cocktails, right? Exactly. It's like as if nothing happened, and the body's just like, whoa, dude. Right? And so coming off of a fast also is an important, like how you onboard your nutrients, your macronutrients, so that your body doesn't get shocked into this new phase, is also a big piece. And that's what we do, right? It's just like feast or famine, and it's just unconscious eating. And so I'd love to, maybe we'll do a whole show on unconscious eating, but that's not this one. We have a ton of stuff about fasting we want to cover here.
Well, I love that you raised this point about kind of the wise reentry. We've talked about this in the context of elimination diets. When you have this clean slate, this beautiful white canvas that you create either from going through an elimination diet for 21 days or going through a fast for whatever, 18 hours, you want to be so mindful about what it is you're feeding yourself on all levels when you come back in. So I really appreciate that point. Another point I want to make, and this is a little plug for oxytocin, is to do this with somebody. Like, do it with a buddy. I think it's so helpful to not be doing this on your own. Certainly there's a benefit in the spiritual traditions of this kind of solitary experience with fasting. That's true with Yom Kippur, for instance, in the Jewish tradition, or Ramadan, or back in my Catholic days, we used to fast on Good Friday, maybe, I'm not sure exactly, and then have fish. And I think there's such a benefit to doing it with somebody. When I've done overnight fasts, I'll often do it with my sister or with my running buddy, and we can text each other and just kind of check in and have both the accountability, but also, be able to troubleshoot when you've got symptoms that come up, or I can't get to sleep, and I feel like sleep is so important while I'm fasting. It's just helpful to have that extra person in your life to go through this with?
Yeah, you talk about atonement, right? And what that's about. And when we are, if we're parsing this out east and west, on the eastern side, you're not fasting arbitrarily, right? You're fasting and you're meditating, you're fasting and you're praying. And I'll extend east to western kind of religious traditions, right? It's about atonement. It's about using that clarity that you get from the process of fasting to really think about the bigger questions in life and recalibrate and reorient and really, measure thrice and cut once type of thing in life. And since that's missing, we all just run around bouncing into walls, trying new fad diets, doing all sorts of crazy things and wondering why our lives are chaotic. So it is really an opportunity to pull back in as well. And I think that, if you're going to play with intermittent fasting, you should also play with consciousness and meditation and prayer or atonement or whatever tradition makes sense to you. Use as an opportunity to be like, oh, you know what, I'm actually going to like pull in and journal this morning, right? Or I'm going to catch up on sleep this morning. Or if you have to go to work, make sure you don't put yourself in a position where you're going into the break room and looking at all the donuts and candy at the coworkers' stations, right? That's where we get into trouble, is the peer pressure. So the buddy system's amazing for that.
Yeah, so true. I love it when I learn something new from you, Pedram. It seems to happen every show. I've never heard you say measure twice and cut once. That just
Thrice.
like pierced me.
Oh, that's actually a carpentry saying, right? So
Oh,
yeah,
measure thrice?
measure thrice and cut once, is the carpenters do that because it's so much easier to kind of be mindful on the front end than to mess up. And so it's a gilded craft, right? Like you learn that by experience, and building a house, it's very easy to see your mistakes. And in some of the mental stuff, it's really hard. That's why like guys like Dave Asprey are making such a splash, because you could live in a Zendo for 20 years and the guy comes by once every 2 weeks and like gives you a little nudge, and it takes you a while to calibrate. Whereas if you're hooked up to a bunch of EEG leads and they start screaming when you're daydreaming, arguably that can be more helpful if we can bring those worlds together.
I think you and I are on the long path. So measure thrice, cut once. I totally love that. And one last thing I want to say about fasting is related to Yom Kippur and this concept of teshuvah. And I came a little late to the Jewish party. I converted to Judaism when I was in my 30s. But I love this idea of teshuvah. It's the concept that as you lead up to the high holidays in the Jewish tradition, you can do this whether you're Jewish or not, you want to start to turn, which is what teshuvah means. And it's, it kind of relates to where you're parking your consciousness. And the idea is that you ask for forgiveness in every aspect of your life where you have harmed someone, whether it was intentional or not. And I think about this a lot, and I think it's another beautiful thread that can tie in with fasting. I think a lot about, how could I be doing better? What have I done, maybe not intentionally, in my marriage, in my mothering, in my friendships, in my work marriage to Pedram? Like, what could I do better? And what can I apologize for? What can I own? And I think that really strengthens your relationships. And then, oh, guess what? Bonus prize, it helps you with the cortisol unlock.
Yeah, great point. Great point. It's, there is, in Taoist thinking, there's really two, it's kind of like a binary system of yin and yang, right? There's the contraction and the expansion of the universe. If you think of the Big Bang, you think of our consciousness, you think of our breath. And fasting should be considered a contraction, right? It's a pulling in a society where everything is out. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll meet you guys for drinks. Oh, yeah, sure, we can commit to that, right? And so we're always out beyond our ability to sustain some of the promises or some of the timelines that we think we can keep. And so one of the really powerful Eastern practices here is to really pull back, check on your priorities, be like, okay, well, if I say yes to that, I just said no to my daughter and I promised I'd hang out with her more. Monkey, no, don't do it, right? And so it's an opportunity to climb up into your prefrontal cortex, really get clear on the decisions and the direction you want to make in life. And again, have clarity and then march into your day going, okay, well, yeah, that sounds great, but that's not for me. You know, this is what I'm doing today. And you've gotten, since I've known you, you've gotten way better at this. Like, I was on a call with Sara and our show producer yesterday, and her entire demeanor has changed because she's now like in this like defensive position about like, okay, what are we doing? How are we going to do it so we don't waste time? How can we get the most bang for our buck? How are we going to be able to help the most people? Da 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 da. And it's like, okay, I get it. I've wasted so much time and energy running around doing everything for so many years that it's exhausted me. So now if I stop saying yes to things and I only say yes to things that matter and are meaningful, then I'll have the energy to like make it to the finish line on this race. And so I've noticed you changing over the last year or so and being a lot more selective about what you say yes to. And I think that's an honorable trait.
Thank you, Pedram. I so appreciate that. And of course, you made the cut.
Thank God.
So glad to be with you. I thought I was being an engineer on yesterday's call and just kind of breaking things down into modules. But you're right. I was sort of minding the shop and,
Yeah.
you know, where am I going to direct the energy? Where is it really going to be of greatest service? How can I help our listeners? How can we connect with them more? How can we get more of their feedback so that we give them what they love? You know, is this show something that you've really enjoyed? What are some of your aha moments? Let us know on Facebook. We love to hear from you.
Yeah, love that. So let's round this out real quick because we had a couple pieces on this study that was interesting. It was like, you know, the co-author, it was Mark Mattson at NIH and Johns Hopkins. And they basically said that consuming just 500 to 600 calories 2 days a week or skipping breakfast or lunch several days a week could boost the immune system, sharpen the mind, and fight off disease. That sounds like something our friend Pedram would say, but this is actually after studying what is happening here. So, you know, for me and, you know, the guys on, you know, team alternative medicine, this is all kind of like vindication. And a lot of people get smug about it and said, well, we've been saying this all along. But I think the important thing to understand here is, yeah, we've been saying this all along because we've seen it. And now that we're seeing it through the studies, we can bring these worlds together and we don't need to bicker. We can just find what's helping people and go there better.
Amen. Amen. You know, I love it when the things that have been done for thousands of years on the Eastern side are finally supported by the hard data, such as we saw in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences and this NPR article. So I really appreciate that too. And I also want to say, you know, for people who are interested in trying this, one of the patterns that I think is helpful, just so you have a container and a little structure here, is to try it for a month. You know, maybe you do the overnight fast, like we were talking about. You know, Pedram gave another alternative where you have dinner at 6 and then you eat again at noon. I'm a working mom, and so I tend to do the dinner at about 4 and then have breakfast at 8 with my kids. So you can figure out what the pattern is, maybe try it for a month and just see what happens. You know, and if it's not going well, go talk to your health professional and get some advice. Maybe test the cortisol, look at some of the metrics that we talked about to see if that's getting in the way.
Yeah, and I want to caution you guys, being a person who's burned himself, that if you're feeling just like irritable and edgy and antsy and faint and just not well during this, then maybe that's a pretty good indicator that you don't have the reserves to be able to play this strategy right now, and you got to go fix your cortisol first. And then you could go there. So when I started messing around with intermittent fasting at some point last year, before we saw Ellen Christensen, and he was like, dude, you need to sleep and you need to, you know, switch a couple things around, I couldn't do it. Now I could do it no problem. Like I'll just skip meals and I'll be fine, but I built up that cushion, that vitality, resilience, if you will. And it took a few months, but now this is another tool that I can draw upon. But if I were to do it last year and force myself to do it because it's like, you know, I'm trying to be a tough guy and push through it, it was actually backfiring because my cortisol levels were skewed. It was putting my body into additional stress mode. It was making me more inflamed and all the things that happen when your body gets agitated and further stressed. So it's about stress, and stress is a really interesting topic because you want to stay just on one side of that stress line, because if you just step over that, then the body's like, okay, too much, I'm freaking out, and we're not going to be able to handle this. So, you know, riding that razor's edge of stress is really a challenge in life, but that's also kind of where I think the key epigenetic expression comes, is staying right under that so you don't die.
Nice. I really like that. And it's, I love talking to you about stress because I feel like it's not that same boring conversation that all of us have had with our primary care providers who just say, you know, reduce stress, exercise more. You know, that I just find that so unhelpful. And I love being able to parse out East meets West and, you know, how do we actually do the best when it comes to stress? How do we stay in that super productive kind of top of the curve, that upside down U shape when it comes to being productive with stress, having eustress, EUSTREESS.
Yep, a term that kind of fell by the wayside with Hans Selye, who originally coined the term. There's distress and eustress, and there's good stress and bad stress. We all talk about bad stress because we're too busy, you know, stuck in traffic and complaining about, you know, Al Qaeda or whatever's going on in the world. But the good stress of, you know, hey, my son just graduated college, and you know, all these wonderful things that move life along are also good medicine. And so maybe we could do a whole show on that. If you guys think that's a good idea, facebook.com/thehealthbridge. I think we're out of time on this one. Any parting shots here, Sarah?
You know, I think the last thing is just, if you want to try intermittent fasting, watch out for those detox signs and see them as these really important messages from your body. I almost think of them as divine messages that you want to decode. So if you want to try intermittent fasting, certainly do that, but watch for some of these signs that it's not going well, and that maybe you need the cortisol unlock. Maybe you need a health professional to hold you by the hand and take you through this.
Yeah, the doctors of our world are incredibly useful if we learn how to work with them in a way that is illuminating, right? So instead of that didactic, just do this and come back, you know, start listening to, following those breadcrumbs. If your body's giving you hints and it's saying, I don't feel well, then the question really is why? And follow that question, and you will unravel not just your health, you'll also unravel a fundamental understanding of yourself that will help you be a better, more illuminated person. So I think that's it on fasting. We recommend it partially, you know. So play with it. If it's for you, then you'll know, and if it's not for you, then go check out your cortisol. Check us out, facebook.com/thehealthbridge. We love doing this, and we need your direction. So help steer us, and when we are on TV and have studio audiences and all the things that looks like is going to start happening, we'd love for you guys to join us there as well. You guys are family.
Yeah, we love you guys. Let us know how the fasting goes. Tell us all about it on Facebook. Okay, we'll see you next time. It's Dr. Sara Gottfried with Dr. Pedram Shojai.
Thanks.